Hello everybody, welcome to today's Dynamics 365 Tech Talk. Today's topic is Dynamics 365 Automated Regression Testing with Leapwork. My name is Namita and I'll be your moderator today. And now presenting for us today from Microsoft, we have our solution architects, Saelen and Andrea Bunduc. Andrea, over to you to get us started.
Thank you, Namita. Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening from where you are watching us today. Welcome to our Tech Talk on automated regression testing with a focus on the Leapwork solution. Kenny and myself will try to cover the following as we move along today. We'll review together the importance of automated regression testing. Kenny will discuss with you the Leapwork solution and its architecture, and at the end, we will be demoing parts of the Leapwork solution as well as an end-to-end test scenario. Before we dive into the Leapwork solution, let's talk about regression testing and why it is a crucial component for any testing strategy. First of all, let's quickly touch upon one version. To enable businesses everywhere to accelerate their digital transformation, Microsoft is continuously enhancing Dynamics 365 with new capabilities through what we call one version by keeping customers on the latest available versions. What does that mean for Microsoft? Concentrated effort on improving the product, enablement of a tighter collaboration with our customers and partners, and ultimately better support. But what does that mean for our customers and partners? Predictable updates with continuous deployment of major minor releases, as well as security updates, early visibility of upcoming changes, capabilities, functionalities that are backward compatible, and the ability to test new capabilities ahead of time. One version is only a part of the cloud journey. Customers have now the ability, like never before, to innovate at a rapid pace, to add new capabilities, new processes, and new tools. As such, while customers continue to shape their businesses, their solutions, and while Microsoft continues to add product enhancements, performance improvements, it is important to ensure that quality gates are put in place to avoid costly disruptions. Therefore, regression testing becomes a key component of a dynamic solution, having the objective to ensure that the solution still performs as expected after a change, and it does that in all environments. It is the moment to identify new bugs, new defects, preserve current functionality, maintain quality, ultimately give the confidence in the solution, keep the user happy and confident in a stable and reliable solution. Usually, regression testing, we see it being performed by quality assurance teams, but we have other stakeholders involved as well. Software developers might run unit tests, might provide input to the type of code changes done, and are often involved in the troubleshooting of the issues identified. End users may perform regression testing to verify that the software meets their needs and expectations after changes have been made. Their feedback is valuable in identifying any usability issues or unexpected behaviors. When to run regression testing? Of course, before any change is introduced to the production environment. While we can all agree this, let's call it a mandatory moment, we should look at regression testing as part of our overall software development lifecycle. That means we do regression testing after code changes, be it critical bug fixes, be it new functionality, during validation of new releases, after data migration, after configuration changes. Given all the above, we can all agree that regression is important, but it can be costly to run manually. We need all the stakeholders that we mentioned to be available. We need to dedicate enough time for the preparation and the execution of the manual tests. As such, automation is key. Automation brings the benefit of testing faster, having better testing coverage, providing repeatability of our regression tests. We talked on the previous slide about one version. Well, automated regression testing would definitely enable customers to accelerate their release cycles through a reduction of the time required to test new releases. By automating regression testing, we ensure that all test cases are run quickly and efficiently. When regression testing is only manual, there might be an increased chance of human error, for example, missing test cases, or deliberately needing to prioritize and skip some tests due to lack of time. In terms of time, automation takes as much planning or even more than what was needed for the manual testing planning. But we can all agree it's a long-term investment that pays itself off with time, with users being able to focus on their regular work than spend time on repetitive and long-running tasks. When it is integrated in the continuous integration and in the continuous deployment environment, automated regression testing becomes part of the regular development cycle, speeding the time invested in regression testing even more. And while there is an initial investment in creating automated test scripts, onboarding the chosen tool, the expectation is that automation will reduce the maintenance costs, will enable cost saving for both time and labor, and will bring more efficiency in utilizing the human resource. And of course, automation brings reliability, high user confidence by enabling an earlier discovery of bugs and issues well before they end up in production. Just to recap, regression testing is essential in a cloud world and automation is key. But regression testing is part of an overall testing strategy, which must always be driven, like anything we do in an implementation, and afterwards must always be driven by business objectives and project scope. For more guidance on testing strategy and how to implement Dynamics 365 successfully, please check our comprehensive implementation guide, which contains the collective experience of the FastTrack team when it comes to best practices for implementing Dynamics 365 applications. It has a wealth of information on various topics such as project governance, methodology, environment management, post-go-live servicing, and of course, testing. In regards to automation, I would like to call out one golden rule, and that is trying to automate everything might be very difficult due to complexity, dynamics of the solution, so on. And what we found out is that normally a distribution of 80% automation and 20% manual is a right balance. A thorough analysis, of course, will be needed to identify the tedious, repeatable test cases that can be automated and the ones that are too complex to be automated and should still be done manually. And since in the next section, Kenny will be walking us and talking about a specific tool for automated regression testing, let's discuss some of the criteria that we recommend customers and partners to have in mind when choosing a specific tool. There are plenty of tools to choose from, suitable for different kinds of scenarios. Having a comprehensive criteria list is very important to identify the correct one for you. You need to start with what are your goals for automation? Why are you putting automation in place? Is it to reduce testing time or costs? Is it to improve test coverage? Or perhaps the goal is to enable the testing team to become more independent and not relying on the technical team. Writing these goals and prioritizing them is a must in the process of selecting the right tool. Consider the catalog of test scenarios. What needs to be tested? What is an end-to-end process? Does it span multiple products? Another criteria to have in mind, what is the experience of the testers? Do they have a technical background and are comfortable with more technical tools, or do they require a simple-to-use interface to define and execute the tests? Is it foreseen that business processes will change in time? As such, maintenance and scalability should be considered a key factor. Is there a need to integrate the automated regression testing with other tools or perhaps incorporate it into the Azure DevOps pipelines? And ultimately, what is the estimated total cost of ownership and the return of investment? Different tools have different costs in terms of licensing, in terms of maintenance, and it is important that you write down this criteria and establish what is more important for you. Next, I will be handing it over to Kenny to walk us through the Leapwork solution. Kenny?
Thank you, Andrea, for that good initial section on, and especially on choosing the right tool. So if we've looked at requirements and what you require from a tool, and then you strategize tooling choice, and Leapwork is one of those tools, of course, if that meets your requirements. Let's have a look at how Leapwork is addressing some of the challenges that also were discussed previously, right? So first off, Leapwork is supporting a wide range of platforms. So it's that's one of the ways it provides answers to some of the challenges with automated regression testing. So let's discuss two of those, and one of them is definitely platform support. First of all, it provides support to work with a wide range of platforms. It is supporting not only just, for example, finance and operations or customer engagement, but it also supports recording across all Microsoft products. Also, it's not only across Microsoft products, but Dynamics 365 most of the times is part of a wider landscape today with different platforms and applications that span even outside of Microsoft technology, right? So Leapwork is meeting where the customer is today, right? And supporting testing across all of their platforms. Second part where Leapwork is addressing some of the challenges today is also the low-code, no-code part. Currently, many organizations need technical resources to drive automation for testing instead of deploying them to work on enhancing the business capabilities. So technical resources are scarce and are often required to go into tooling that really requires technical knowledge to be able to record some of these tests and to kind of automate them, right? Building and automating these test cases will definitely require them to navigate through some technical languages at some point, understanding XML files, so all of these details that are needed to automate it. So here Leapwork's solution is to provide a graphical editor that is fluent for users to record, and the important part there is that users are just doing what they will be doing in a normal day-to-day execution of their business processes. So there's nothing different for them, just running it, and Leapwork will make sure that the recording experience is easy to do for them. Next, let's have a look at the overall architecture and integration capabilities of Leapwork. So on this slide, we have the logical components of what Leapwork is made of. So at the top, when we start with the agents, these are actually providing the automation capacity, right? Those are the heavy lifting execution bots, if you will. So one agent runs one automation flow at a time. That's an important thing. And then parallel execution requires some parallel agents to be there. Next, we have the controller. Controller is kind of the server, the management and repository here. So all assets related to your test, so the recordings you do, the flows and subflows that you create, and all of the videos are stored on the controller side. So videos and screenshots, which is one of the features of Leapwork, everything is recorded and screenshotted throughout the execution. That will remain on the file system of the controller, and all other assets will be stored in the controller database. Next up, the studio. So this is where it's the user's home, right? That's the user's workplace. Users will use the studio to do the recording experience. So that's actually the UI and the front-end facing part of the Leapwork solution. It allows people to author, edit, and troubleshoot any of the recording flows, testing scenarios that you have out there. What the studio also provides, next to some of the settings that you can do, is also the reporting part. There are reports that you can generate out of test execution. So that's also part of the UI in the studio. So that's the logical view of what components we have for Leapwork. Let's look at it from a bit of a technical angle here. So we see the same controllers here. So you have the studio up on your top left. So this currently is a Windows end user desktop. Leapwork is moving into providing a SaaS solution upcoming, but today we still have the Windows end user desktop for this. So the studio itself is going to communicate with the Leapwork agent through TCP protocol, right? You can see the port numbers here. So that's when users are recording in the studio, and then when they want to run some of the test scenarios, the agent is going to be invoked and test scenarios are going to be run. An additional option, so we've stated here a Windows VM where you can install an agent on through the installer. So that's one of the options, but you're not limited to that option. There are also other ways to host agents with the remote cloud agents. So Browser Stack and Source Labs, Gridlastic, these solutions are there to kind of easily generate and scale up agents on the fly. So then both the studio and the agent will talk to the controller. They will do that through either TCP port 9000 or it's going to be a WebSocket. The Leapwork controller itself is also providing a REST API to do communication. We'll discuss the REST API in the next slide. So that's coming up. Then, as you can see, the controller itself uses the default MS SQL port to communicate to the SQL database that is below it. It's either going to be SQL database or it's using SQLite. As a last part, both the Studio and the REST API can communicate to external integration components. So there are integrations with Azure DevOps, with Jenkins, Jira, so TeamCity, for example. So all of the known players in the area are there. And yeah, Leapwork is just talking to these components also. So whatever tool you have today, you can integrate with that one. As we mentioned before, so integration is a key component also in strategizing your solution that you want to use for regression testing, right? So integration capabilities are really important here. This REST API provides a wide range of APIs. As you can see on the right side, there are endpoints to get everything you desire from the Leapwork part. So for example, if you want to get a status of an execution of a run, then you can do that by getting the status there, right? We can get schedules, we can run items, so that's all available. And there's also some commands we can do to start and stop and rerun on agents, so you can control the flow of a test execution through this API. So the REST API is hosted on the controller, as we could see on previous parts. So by default, it's using the 9001 port. This is configurable when you install the controller. And then to reach it, there's the kind of format of how you can do it in that URL. So you can reach out and do any REST API call that you want to do. Of course, we also have authentication in place for this API. So it is using user access keys, and they can be fetched from within the Leapwork Studio. So the Studio provides through the settings part access to all these API keys to connect and authenticate with the Leapwork solution. There is also good documentation on this REST API, so that's also on the slide. So people getting the slides afterwards of this tech talk will be able to directly go and dig into the documentation with all the details on the API. Next, integration with DevOps pipelines. That's, of course, for us, it's a really important part that there is integration possible with DevOps pipelines. So basically the idea here is to be able to include regression testing in your existing pipelines, right? Most of the Dynamics implementation teams now have pipelines already available to either build the source code or release pipelines to release source code packages through the environment landscape. So there's two ways where we can, or how we can integrate DevOps with DevOps. So one is DevOps tasks that are available in the marketplace. Leapwork has a set of tasks, if you will, to be included in pipelines. So that's natively integrating with the UI of DevOps here, and then you can just run Leapwork tests as we go there. The other option is to more of a script-based option where you can use PowerShell, because PowerShell is also widely adopted in the DevOps ecosystem there. And in those PowerShells, you can actually do the integration through the REST API we just discussed, right? So as soon as you can put a PowerShell task on your pipeline, you're free to do whatever and call the REST API and control the flow of the testing that way. Second thing is that where the idea would be to use Leapwork as a automated quality gate. We're shipping code, we're moving it along through our release pipeline. So what you can do here is code that is shipped through pipelines can now be regression tested. So this means you can get the result of some testing in a pipeline, and you can actually stop deploying to environments that are further down the stream upon failing tests that indicate that you have regression. The last thing you want to do is cause regression in environments where UAT is ongoing in pre-production and production environment. So if you run Leapwork as part of a release pipeline that is deploying to your test environment, have it test some of the priority test cases that you have. And if no regression is there, you can move on. If there is regression, well, let's not release to further environments then and create automatically some tracking work items so that at least you can fix the defect and the regression before moving forward. As an as part, what's also available here is that you can generate test result reports automatically, right? So that at least you can see where the errors are, what is going wrong. And so some reporting is available. Also about what the success rates are of your tests. And DevOps, of course, is also providing a lot of options here. So that is natively integrated. Next part, let's discuss security for a brief while. So currently with Leapwork, the deployment is done on your own infrastructure, right? So there is no access from the Leapwork organization to any of your environments there. So it's purely on your infrastructure. As mentioned, the Leapwork team is working towards a SaaS solution, but today it's on your infrastructure only. In terms of access management, you have like onboard user management that you can do through the studio itself, but there's also Active Directory integration possible. So access through APIs are managed through the API keys, as I mentioned just before. So that's in the studio where you can create and manage those API keys. So by default, traffic through to the API is not non-encrypted, but it's possible to provide your own certificate and to secure it with your certificate. In terms of encryption, all data is encrypted in flight through the TLS 1.2 that is implemented, and at rest. So for the MS SQL and SQL service, the default non-encrypted, but except for secrets, and encryption is per local policy there. If you use the onboard SQLite option, then AES 256 is being used. Then parts of the automation management. So there is a full audit log also on board of anything that was running and automated and accessed. So there's also major minor versioning with restore capabilities. So in terms of if anything goes wrong with the testing catalog and the flows that you created, there are ways where you can restore those flows. So there's also workflow management on board in the studio option there. And there are also protected published versions of these automations. So that's a kind of a good bridge to the next slide. The role-based access control that is available through the Leapwork solution. So there's 4 levels of access, right? We have an administrator level, we have a contributor level, the reader, and the no access. I think the latter is pretty clear, no access, that's self-explanatory. The other one, so for the administrator, this is a user that is created during the installation. That comes automatically. It has full access to all platform settings, as you might expect. And then the administrator role can also self-service access, right? So it can ensure that others are also given permission. And the CRUD on some flows that you create is also available. They can create, read, and update. And this is the important part, that this is the only user type that can restore flow versions. So if you have a certain flow that you have created, there is versioning included in the solution, but if anything goes wrong or the flow gets changed in a way that is not desirable, the administrator is the only one who can actually restore to previous versions. Then we have the contributor role. So this is just a bit more limited in terms of settings, but contributors can still create, read, and update, delete certain flows, and they can see the flow versions and which ones are available, but they cannot do the restore. The reader role, as the last one, just has read-only access to flows to be able to view and to run them, but they are not able to create new flows and test recordings. So that part was covering at least a bit of the architecture and integration capabilities provided by the Leapwork solution. I think now it's time for 2 demos. First one is a quick demo on the recording experience. Next up, we will show a demo of an actual scenario that spans across customer engagement and finance and operations. So here we have a UI studio where we have a flow that's going to launch Dynamic CE and does a simple action of creating a job task. Upon starting the recording is happening within a normal UI where the users are carrying out the steps of the process to create a task. So after filling out the ID and the description, the user will stop the recording and will be done. And note that we do not see any of the gory details of IDs and technical details that would be needed. Back in the UI studio, the recording actions can be kind of grouped into a subflow. This is creating a reusable component to be reused in other test cases. So you can treat these steps as one block. So this is all just a point and click. And now let's get rid of some of the hard-coded things that we recorded. So now we're gonna enable reading from Excel, right? So we just put that in between. You choose the file with the data that you have. And what is nice about this is then you can read the columns, and now you can kind of map the columns to the fields that you want to import. So that's what they feed into. So let's just test that that works. And then, so this is just being filled from the Excel at this point. So now you see in the studio, back in the studio, what is really good, and I'll just put back this on the screen here, is that as you can see, there's 3 components now in the studio when you have just recorded and ran a test case. So the first part is just where you see your flow, and you can already see like a visual indicator around the create new task, where you can see where the current in the video where we're scrolling through. This is where currently the flow is stopped at. And the other 2 parts are providing you one with a recording video. So everything that is recorded also has video evidence of it. If anything is going wrong or the test case fails, you can immediately go back to this one. You can see the video, what the browser was actually doing, and you can scroll through. While you scroll through, the other 2 components will also update. So the visual indication will be there. Plus also on the right side, you see a detailed log of which element had what input and then what was being done at that exact time. So there is a kind of fluent connection between these 3 parts to enable you to troubleshoot very quickly in case of a test case failure. This is also true for when you, for example, have an integration with DevOps. When you run the test case there, afterwards there's always going to be a recording available on the controller, so you can always go back even in those automated scenarios. So that was a quick initial demo just to show you kind of very quickly the recording experience of what you might expect. So the next demo is about cross-product recording. I know this is definitely for Dynamics implementations an important requirement. We've just taken the order to cash scenario here. So what you're about to see is a test running that is going to log into finance and operations first. Then it's going to create a customer there. We have an environment where Duo Write is enabled, right? So CE and F&O are connected. Once the customer is created, immediately Duo Write will do whatever it needs to do to sync the customer across F&O and CE. So then after that first part, immediately the Leapwork solution is going to start up the customer engagement in the browser and is going to create a sales order for the customer we just created. Again, Duo Write will do its work. And then we will go back and just go to F&O, pick up the sales order that was created in customer engagement, and from there we're going to go and invoice it. One detail maybe, this is just a recording of the execution, right? So this we pre-recorded this in the studio itself. What you will see is when the F&O part is done, you'll see the browser close down and then the next one will be starting, and you'll briefly see the subflow that we have created for that in the background. So first we're going to log into the environment. This is, by the way, a reusable component where we just recorded logging in and then changing the company to the right legal entity that we want. So that takes a few seconds, and you'll see that in the third part reappearing. So now we're going to go through the menu to the customers list page and just create a new customer, fill in the details that we need, initial parts of the address, how customer is being saved. We'll make some slight modification to the address to support our scenario here. So we make it a delivery address. Here you can see kind of the subflows. So all of these things we do is kind of reusable. We can do the create customer in another flow and grab the same components. So now second part, Leapwork is now going to navigate to CE. Do write would have done his job by now. So if we do new order, we can use that customer that we had created earlier. Now we're just gonna add some products. So in this case, we are grabbing a Surface laptop. Then we save. Do write will also kick in the background and will sync across the product. So now we're switching to F&O again, and we are using the reusable component of the login part, changing company. And from here now the sales order will be available also in finance and operations. So we'll first navigate to the sales orders and then filter on the one we have created. We're changing the warehouse here within F&O, and then we are just going to use the invoice tab and generate the invoice here. So that screen pops up, we press OK, and then the invoice will be happening. So that is kind of the scenario where we go cross-product and where Leapwork is able to just switch easily and provide the same recording experience. So next steps. So we've also provided you, if you get the slide deck from the TechTalk website, there will be some documentation links also in here. Some of the parts have links straight on the slides, but here we've included the more generic links here. So in general, you'll see the testing strategy that we have documented on Microsoft Learn. And there's also going to be a form there to reach out. If you want to get connected, you can use the aka.ms link there for the Leapwork leads. And then from there on, the process will take you further. So with that, we have left some room for questions. So if there are questions, we're happy to address them.
There are a couple of questions, Kenny. The first one that I would like to call out regarding licensing. We had some questions asking about the costs. We won't be touching about licensing in this tech talk, and what we will be sharing as part of this deck is a link for you to get in touch with the responsible people, get in touch with Leapwork, and you'll get more information about licensing from there. And another question that I would like to call out, Kenny, is in various forms asking about RSAT and about other tools on the market. I believe the slide in which we advised you to look at the criteria, to write them down, identify the right, and with their help, identify the right tool still stands. But maybe, Kenny, if you would like to add a couple of words to that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So first off, I think it's indeed a kind of a mix of questions regarding RSAT. So RSAT is not going away, right? It is there and it has its features and that it provides its solution on its own. So indeed, as you also mentioned, Andrea, there is the strategy for choosing a tool, right? So every customer should go through those criteria to determine it. If you are a customer that, so there's two options. If you're a customer that today has only a requirement to do a limited set of recording, and within F&O, you don't need any cross-product recording, then RSAT is definitely still answering to those requirements, right? So it's definitely a viable option. Second scenario, if you today already have invested in scenarios with RSAT and those recordings, you can still keep on using them, right? We are not taking RSAT away for sure.
Thanks, Kenny. There's another question around customization support. Does Leapwork also supports the customization that is done on the F&O application?
Yeah. Good question. The answer to that is yes, obviously. Why? Because even technically Leapwork doesn't even know it's testing F&O, right? It is recording in the browser, it's recording across products. So that does work. So whether it's the standard out-of-the-box sales order screen or another screen you have developed or customized or extended the application, that is definitely supported, yes.
Thanks, Kenny. There's another question. Can we use Leapwork for performance and stress testing?
Yeah, good question also. I would say the answer to that is it's limited use for performance testing. One of the reasons is that currently the agent is running one flow, right? So you would need to parallelize the agents to do that. That might be possible, but it's not, at this point, it's not really suited for doing proper performance testing, right? Because also if you do performance testing, let's say you want to simulate 500 users running simultaneously, you would also want like different kind of metrics and requirements from a performance testing tool. So it's not intended as primary use to be used for performance testing today.
Thank you. There's another question about, is third-party website supported in the test process?
I think we might have to kind of verify this with the technical team there, but I do think it will be supported because, again, the recording experience is across a browser, right? So the techniques to capture input from a browser will be the same with those third-party websites. For example, if you look at like commerce is also supported with Leapwork, right? It's a different experience there.
Yeah. All right. There's a question, how can we create a trial environment?
I think like technically we can answer that. It's by then going through installation process, which is pretty well documented on the Leapwork site, I have to admit. I think the best way would be to use the aka.ms link and get in contact with the Leapwork team, and they can guide you through achieving that.
Sure. Thank you. Okay, there is another question. Are there any RSET assets to be able to use in Leapwork?
Oh, it's a fantastic question, really. And currently today, we don't have a straight answer to that one, but it is definitely something we're kind of looking into, if that would be something that we can work on. To reuse those recordings, if you will, right? There might be some creative options out there already today. We can kind of record what one tool does with the other one, but let's look at these formats and see if there's anything possible that we can come up with.
Thanks, Kenny.
One interesting question, Namita, about how does parameterization work? Do you want to take that one?
Yes, yeah. So that's about like removing some of the hard-coded parts, right? I think maybe the question was asked before we showed the initial demo, but there are options to parameterize these tests by, for example, the one we showed where you can include an Excel block to read from an Excel file. And there's not only Excel, there's any kind of data source can be used. You can even fetch from a database. So there are parts in the recording blocks available to do that. And then within your test case, you can then read from that data source in a randomized way and have it used as input for the test, right? Ideally, I think if you're looking at integration scenarios with DevOps and automated in pipelines, either database or Excel to be able to provide it with different data would be ideal.
Thanks, Kenny. Actually, that brings me to my next question, which is, how can we use DevOps and make it automated? Is there a way we can do this with Leapwork?
I would say if the recording becomes available, there is a part that we discussed in the DevOps automation part, yes. Right? There's pipelines there available. And also on that slide, maybe if you want to go a bit more deeper in the slide, there's a link on the Leapwork documentation on this. They have some great articles available where from A to Z, they go through setting it all up and including it in a pipeline. So definitely possible, yeah. It's one of the key components, I would say.
And there are a couple of questions around WHS. Does Leapwork also work with WHS app warehouse?
Yeah, we actually discussed that with the Leapwork team yesterday. So that is definitely available. Yeah, that also works. There are options to do that.
Thank you.
Another question, is parallel execution possible?
Yeah. So it is possible, but as I think it is a combination of that question with the one on the performance, right? So you can do parallel execution, definitely, but you will need parallel agents to do that, right? Because, yeah, agent and controller are busy doing the heavy lifting of one flow, doing the video recording, all of that. So then when you want to run next to each other, you need a separate agent. You can compare it to parallel job agents on DevOps, right? If you want to run one pipeline and you want to subsequently or in parallel run another one, you need multiple agents for that. Yes.
Can we run the same test in multiple environments, or is it dependent on the test data? Can we run the same test in multiple environments?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's definitely covered. I think it's a combination of the question with parameters in the testing, right? So yes, you can reuse the flow. Let's look at the flow as a blueprint of a test scenario, and then from there you can feed it through Excel or any external data source.
Is it possible to do checks with Leapwork? For example, testing tax calculation in D365 FNO, and we want to check if the tax amount is calculated correctly. Can we check a field value which is generated in the test?
Yes, yeah. So the way you can do that is, so in the flow itself, if you're still in FNO and you're recording a flow that is in FNO, for example, then you can say after your action, there is a block where you can, like each of these block has like success and failure options, and then you can also validate input by putting a block in to read the value of a certain control. So you're able to do that for sure within the flow. Additionally, another option to do this is, depending on how complex your scenario is, what you also might do is, if, for example, let's say you want to test, you did something in FNO, and then you need to go and check on the other side on CE, for example, to see if something came through the right way and if the calculations are done correctly, you can then record a subflow where you can say, now we open up CE, we filter on whatever we need to filter on, and then we go and capture these values and see success or failure. So that is all possible within the editor, yes.
All right, there is one more question on comparison with RSET. We'll take that. RSET can verify specific output of the process by the status equal to posted as a success testing criteria. How is this done in Leapwork? The pass or fail?
I think it would be same, right? If you're still in the UI and you're doing the recording, you can just click the field that you want to test and say the value. If it's this, then success or fail. So it's in a similar experience, I would say. So it's definitely possible to do that.
Right. Thanks, Kenny. I think we are all done and we are at time. So thank you so much, Kenny and Andrea, and our engaging audience for attending today's Tech Talk. This concludes our session, and we hope you have a great rest of the day. Thank you.